I would like to introduce Greg, KO6TH. Let's learn more about digital modes. This will be a follow-up to K6 UDA's presentation on Fusion a few months ago. And now Greg is going to kind of talk about what else is out there digitally, and take it away.
So this is the other shoe. This is, well, we started something back in February. Been itching to try the various digital modes and stuff, and we finally got an experiment going on the 70 centimeter machine, running the Yaesu Fusion. And Bob, K6 UDA, gave us a nice presentation in February describing the system, talking about how it works, how to use it, what the experiment was all about. I think we've pretty much decided the experiment was a success, and so we're going to move forward with that machine. But that's not the only digital voice mode out there. There are other ones out there, D-Star, DMR, and the rest. So I've been wondering about them myself, trying to figure out how they all work. And so I've said the best way to learn something is to teach somebody else. And so that's what we're going to do tonight, is try to understand together what the rest of the stuff is. Bob gave us this overview of the Fusion. I'll have these slides up on the Groups.io site afterwards, so you don't need to scribble down notes on links and that kind of stuff. Usually you don't put such detail, but I'll have the presentation available afterwards. So during Bob's presentation, we heard things mentioned: D-Star, DMR, C4FM, Ambi, P25, and a whole bunch of different words that sounded like the same thing but seemed to be different. Groups, talk groups, rooms, all kinds of stuff. So what I'm going to do is kind of take a step back to basics, cover some of the fundamentals so we can build on that, understand how all this stuff fits together. Digital voice is like listening to a podcast, listening to streaming audio on your PC. It's analog data, analog signal is converted to data. The data gets compressed. You can think zip, remember zip archives, to crunch things down. But it's done, MP3, for example, is not just simply a compression algorithm. It understands a lot about what humans perceive as sound. And it uses that knowledge to compress way beyond, to throw stuff away that we wouldn't understand anyway as humans, to get like a 10-to-1 compression ratio. The stream of bytes gets chopped up into packets. There's additional information like your call sign, a bunch of other stuff thrown in there. That set of bits is sent to a modulator. Think like your old PC modems. Modulated signal gets sent to the antenna, and the receiver does it all in reverse. And so you end up with that audio stream back on the other end, which sounds really easy, right? Okay, there are two slides in this presentation that I spent a lot of heartache on. This is the first one. Standards are wonderful because we have so many of them to choose from. That's a theme here. When you convert voice to digital, it's called a codec that does this. It's a coder or decoder. There's Ambi, there's IMBE, which was the predecessor to Ambi. There's Codec 2, which is an open source version of something like IMBE and Ambi, and there's a bunch of other ones. The key is they got to be the same on both ends of the conversation. You can't have someone speaking French and someone speaking German. They're not going to talk to each other. We heard about D-Star, Yaesu Fusion, DMR, all those things. Guess what? They all use Ambi. Yay. Not so fast. There's different versions of Ambi, and guess what? They're not compatible. When you put all this stuff into a set of packets, the other information that gets put in different order. There's different information that goes in. You look at this frame example down at the bottom down here. That's just an example of one of the D-Star frames. All kinds of stuff is in these frames that gets sent out over the air. And each of these things does it a little bit differently. And then, just to make things totally incompatible, when you shove things over the air, there's different modulation techniques. So on analog, we have sideband, we have FM, we have AM, we have all those things. Well, here you've got GMSK, C4FM, FSK, TDMA, and each of the different protocols, guess what? They use a different RF modulation scheme. So on every level, you have incompatibility between these various digital voice standards. No wonder they don't work together. So I'm going to go over the two of the main ones, D-Star and DMR, give a little review, talk about how to get on them, and how to make some of this stuff work. D-Star is the Digital Smart Technologies for Amateur Radio. It sounds wonderful. First digital voice system proposed by the JAR, the Japanese Amateur Radio League, back in 2001. ICOM was the first to market, in fact the only one to market until recently with the equipment, 2004. It's digital voice. It's also DRATS, is digital data. You can think of a couple of months ago we had a presentation on Arden, the data network. It's kind of like that, but an earlier version. I'm not going to talk about that tonight. It's a whole other world. And there's, you've heard of DPRS, which is kind of like APRS, but not the same. D-Star has a digital channel to it, along with the voice. Might as well throw something in there, like your location, which is what Pete Lovell did, AE5PL, and kind of makes a position reporting kind of thing, which is not what APRS is about, but it kind of sort of works. And of course, ICOM and Kenwood do things a little bit differently when they did that implementation. Configuring D-Star, it was the first, so it's a little clunky. There are 4 fields you got to configure. If you get your ICOM guys, I think they made it a little better. Kenwood's done a lot better on this thing. There's my call, which is your call. There's your call, which is the call of the other person you're talking to. Note the language there is kind of confusing. Or you can put CQ, CQ, CQ in there for all. It's kind of the wild card. There are 2 repeater call signs to put in if you want to be talking through a repeater. And there's zones that you can stick in there. And I'll show you a little picture in a second here about what this is all talking about. So you've got these 4 fields that you got to set right. If they're not set right, you can be talking and no one hears you. You can be listening and not hearing things. It's kind of finicky, but there's a lot of flexibility built into that, which I'll get to later. The repeater call signs can have a port designation on them, a module. ABC usually are the 3, and also G. You tab forward here a little bit. So you can think of a repeater as having a controller and a bunch of radios, and the letter corresponds to which of the modules you're talking to. So if you want to come in on the 2 meter, go out on the 70 centimeter, you may come in on A and go out B, or something like that. So you'll see that kind of lingo in the D-Star configuration. ICOM exposes the fields very bluntly in their configuration, which is why it's very flexible but easy to get wrong. Kenwood hides them. They try to make things easy for you, which generally, if you don't mess with them, they do pretty good. But if you want to get in there and do things kind of unusually, it can get kind of tricky. So the DV mode and DR mode, which kind of makes things easy for the Kenwood. But it's all there if you want to dig into it. To get on D-Star, both D-Star and DMR require registration. There's a security and call sign registration deal you have to go through. You register. There's a link there I'll post with the slides. You go to a website basically. And this one's hosted by the club down in Concord, the Bay Area. You sign up. You follow the instructions. You get connected in their database. There's another site you go to find the repeaters. The local there's only 2. That's the one in Concord, which physically is on Mount Diablo, so you can actually hit it from here with a bit of gain. I've done it with my Kenwood and my satellite beam. There's also a repeater in Folsom, which I'm shadowed. I can hear it, but they can't hear me very well. So there's that one as well. That's why we're thinking about on the 220 machine that we have of maybe using that for a D-Star connection, and because there's very limited coverage for D-Star up here in the foothills. Might be an option. So what we're thinking about. Some of the radios have a database that you can have internally. The Kenwoods have this. I think the newer ICOMs as well, where you can look up by your GPS. Say, okay, I just landed in, Chicago. What can I get on? And they'll bring it up for you. And of course, you can type things in by hand if you want to do that. So that's D-Star, kind of in a nutshell. Getting onto DMR, the other one here. This is a different kind of system. It's based on a commercial radio, little handhelds. It's kind of the use profile that they started with. By using digital, the commercial services get better battery efficiency, because the digital amplifier is more efficient, just being on and off instead of having all the analog stuff in between. Narrower channels, all that kind of stuff makes for a better radio foundation. Was never intended to be used for amateurs, but with some ingenuity, hams have figured out how to do this. There's a radio ID based on your call sign that we'll get into in a second here. You've got basic handheld. There also are some other formats that you can use for doing DMR. There is some digital stuff behind the scenes. It's not universal among all the radios. And because of some of that incompatibility, the more popular one of the encoders turns out it's not patent encumbered, and you can do some decoding of it. I believe that's how it's done. Maybe they have a chip in there and they decode it that way. I'm not exactly positive. High-level configuration. As I said, radios, repeaters, everything on DMR has a numeric ID, which means you got to go on a website, get an ID for every piece of equipment. You can have more than one. There are color codes that get assigned, which is a little weird. It's kind of like a PL tone, but not exactly. You just have to know what it is you're talking to in terms of what color they have it assigned to. Traffic, because of this digital thing, they came up with this thing where you have 2 time slots. And the idea is that you could have 2 voice streams coming out of a repeater at the same time. So think back to the commercial use. The guard at the front shack can have their radio on and talk to home base, and have that same repeater on top of the building be talking to the folks that are doing gardening or whatever, or other operations for the site, without interfering with each other. So it's a doubling of the channels. In ham usage, typically one is fixed in and out, one is dynamic for connecting into the internet. That's kind of just a generality. But think about that guard at the front shack. Okay, he's sitting there, or she's sitting there with basically nothing to do all day because no one's coming to work these days. So he's got a radio in front of him and would love nothing better than to start poking the buttons and seeing what it can do. These things are locked down. They require a computer to configure them. It's called a code plug, which you then install. You configure the radio from a PC using software. It's all proprietary software, comes with the radio. But that's how you set these things. You don't sit there pushing buttons from the front panel. They are kind of locked down in that regard. But given where they came from, that's kind of what's going on there. As with DMR, with D-Star, for DMR you got to get on a website, a different one, radioid.net. You punch in your call sign and some other information. You get back a 7-digit number. That is the ID for that radio. One per radio, and of course you can have more than one. Get your code plugs. There are some that you can find on the internet as a starting place. Generally, you download what the radio has in it, modify it, and load it back up again. And then repeaters. There's another website for the database there. There are some, it appears in Auburn, Rockland, and Sacramento show up in the database. I don't have a DMR radio, so I couldn't check them out, but that's what I understand. So that's the 2 basic digital voice things I want to talk about. Let me break for a quick second for questions, and I'll get into some more information here. Any questions so far?
Greg, K6UDA with a information.
Yeah.
We have in the area one DMR repeater, which is owned by Jeff, AK60K.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So
The database is incorrect.
yes, and he just put that up in February. So
Okay.
it's a new repeater. There are no other repeaters in Sacramento that are accessible.
Okay. I'll modify this slide before I post. Is his in Auburn?
Yes.
Okay.
At the same repeater site that all the rest of his repeaters are at.
Ah, okay. Very good. Yeah, there's also a D-Star repeater that's shown in the D-Star list that I understand is not there, so I didn't include it in that slide. Okay, thank you for the update. Okay, mentioned back in February were two other modes, P25, more public safety things, a little bit newer, various codecs. It's not quite as used. And NXDN is a kind of a forward-looking, it's kind of the long-term evolution, LTE kind of a thing. Again, even less in terms of the ham radio base. There is some gaining traction in this one because of the commercial opportunities there, different use of spectrum, different efficiencies. So this one keep an eye on this one for the long term. But for now, it's like not there. We took a poll, if you remember, back in February. Yaesu was the number one, D-Star number two at about half. Yaesu was about half the club, D-Star was about a quarter, DMR about a third, and then it was a couple down there. Interestingly, nobody in the club did not have some digital, which was very nice. Okay, so I said there were two slides that caused me a lot of grief. This is the second one. Any questions? So there was when I used to work, there was our marketing guy had a talent for putting together these slides that he could put one slide up and talk for hours. And this is one of his kind of slides, but I'm not going to go do that to you. Let's simplify things a little bit and kind of work up to this level of detail. The idea was, trying to figure out, how does all this stuff play together? How do we connect all the pieces together so that you can actually communicate with these radios? You can start out with just a pair of radios. Two D-Star radios can talk to each other directly. And this is, again, opportunity for getting things wrong. If you have one radio going to CQ, as in talk to anybody, but the other guy's got a specific configuration, a different radio in his configuration, he can't talk back. So there's opportunities even at this level. Fusion, I think, does a whole lot better at this in terms of allowing things to communicate. To get the idea of repeaters, you've got you can do basically a pass through. What's important here? Think back to that slide about the codec, the ambi decoder encoder. There's the only coders and encoders in this picture are in the radio. Okay, so the digital voice gets encoded by the radio on, say, on the left. It gets passed unaltered through the repeater, squirted out to the other side, and decoded in the radio on the right. So if you were to listen in anywhere along that path, you would hear just buzzing. You couldn't hear anything, and nothing the repeater can do internally can change that. There's no way, there's no port in that repeater where you can extract the audio and feed it into something else. There's no analog hole, if you will, borrowing from the music industry. The way you send traffic from one place to the other is you designate that ABC port on the side. That goes from radio to radio, and out it comes. But what they've done with D-Star, because it's digital, you can run the digital traffic, those packets, through a room and over to another, my mouse out here, maybe a little better. You can go from the G port, the gateway, out through a reflector to another repeater and have that come down to the radio. And these REF XXX, you've heard of 30 Charlie. That's one of these things. That's REF 030C. So it's a C port out the side of that thing, and G port I assume into it. That is one of the reflectors that's out there. So you can use this infrastructure on the internet to tie two different repeaters together that may be on different sides of the planet, which is kind of neat. But if you're sitting there like Jerry was, driving down I-5, not in range of the repeater, you can get into these rooms through a hotspot. There's many available. They basically are a radio and like a Raspberry Pi or something, a little computer that takes the digital packets that your handheld is sending out, and they packet them up and make a connection, a TCP/IP connection, off to the D-Star room, and off your traffic goes and comes out the other side as if you were talking on the local repeater. You basically have a repeater of your own sitting in your shack. The neat thing about that is, with a regular repeater, if you want to have this repeater talk to that room, everybody on that repeater talks to that room. Whereas if you have a hotspot, you can have your own decision. Well, the local repeater is sitting on 30 Charlie. I want to talk to 29 Charlie. And so I can connect my hotspot to somebody else, have a separate conversation locally instead of going through the club repeater. So there's that. But these hotspots are pass-throughs. So if I want to talk from my D-Star D74 to Bob's, what do you got, Bob? F400, whatever it is, the FT400 transceiver, I can't do that unless there's a box in the middle somewhere that has a decoder chip in it. And this is a very key piece of the puzzle. You have to have the decoder chip that's built into this radio, has to be in that marvelous little piece of equipment, so that my analog, my voice transmission gets terminated here at that that room, decoded by that chip, re-encoded by a different chip, and then sent back out over the air, over to the fusion side to come out over on say on our 70 centimeter machine. So these rooms are becoming more common, the ones that can transcode. There's not that many of them, and the one that we're hooked to right now apparently does not transcode, does not have that chip in it. So answer that question, nope, we can't do that right now. There is, however, an alternative, which is to get a hotspot that has the chip in it. There is one on the market right now. It's the OpenSpot 3. And what it does is it has the AMBI1 encoder chip in it, so that my transmission can go from my radio to my hotspot, get decoded, get re-encoded, and then shoveled off to the same rooms and off to the ASU system over on this side. I could even have my D-Star get decoded, translated into DMR, and come out and go over and talk to a DMR radio. So there's a lot of different options you can do once you have that chip, which is included in the hotspot, the OpenSpot 3. You can do a lot of things. Last I checked, it was on back order, but it is available. So you put everything together, and this is what you get, right? We're back to that first slide. You have your radios. They can talk pass through repeaters to other radios. They can talk through hotspots that don't do transcoding through reflectors, rooms rather, to other repeaters and back in to the same kind of equipment, or you can go through a transcoding hotspot to a regular room, or from a non-transcoding hotspot to one that does transcode to come out on a different mode. The Yaesu repeaters have rooms of their own. They're called reflectors, Wires X. They're locked by Yaesu. They're only Yaesu ones, but we can talk to non-Yaesu ones from our equipment. There are some gateways that aren't locked down, and so we have a room that we can talk to from our repeater that doesn't transcode, but we can connect in the doesn't do the voice transcoding, but you can transcode say DMR and Fusion. Let me confuse you here for a second. D-Star think back to that slide, uses one of the AMBI chips. FCS Fusion and DMR use a different one. These two are the same encoders. So if I want to go from, say, DMR to Fusion, I can shuffle the packet format around without changing the digital voice, and I can do a light transcoding from DMR to Fusion and back. I just can't do it from D-Star. So, because this slide and because the other ones are kind of thick, I'm going to post this on our Groups IO forum there, so you guys can peruse through this thing. I've got a couple of links at the end here on a comparison for the various modes, some ideas about how to set things up, and kind of a D-Star for Dummies, which brace yourself, it's 100 pages long. So yeah, there's a lot to it, but they try to make some sense out of it. So that's the presentation as I have it. Let me open it up for questions. Speechless.
Okay, does anyone have any questions about D-Star, DMR, and the rest, and how all of this fits together?
I have a question, WA6E.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Is there any trend within the ham radio community towards one of these systems or the other? I suppose D-Star might have a certain following because it was first. Is there one that's taking over? Are they competing for the?
So back in February, when I introduced Bob, I took a little poll of our club, as unscientific as that is. Raise of hands, how many people have Fusion? About half the club. How many have D-Star? About a third. DMR? About a quarter. Who has only analog? Nobody put their hand up. So there is, within our community, a trend toward the Fusion. D-Star still has a very vocal support, especially in Japan, as you might expect. So I don't see this going, personal opinion here, I don't see any one of these taking over. What I'm guessing is going to happen is more of that multi-protocol room transcoding thing, where there's one report that I saw that the patent that encumbered the AMBI1 encoder, that patent expired recently. So what that suggests is that we may be in a position where people can re-implement that encoder and do a software-based hotspot or software-based room. It's a $20 chip, not super expensive, but when you build a lot of them, it adds up. So we may see more of a trend there. I think that's what's going to happen. Is we're going to have a lot of these individual radios, each little island of protocol, and then they'll be interlinked through rooms and gateways and reflectors and time something. There's a talk group. There's the other one for DMR. So yeah, that's my opinion. Anybody else that has seen something different?
K6UDA.
Go ahead, Bob.
Very interesting. I had a talk with Ray Novak from ICOM, and Ray had a very interesting concept about the DMR, because I flat out asked him, I said, is ICOM thinking of making a multi-mode digital radio? Are they thinking of getting into the DMR market? He said, no, we're not getting into the DMR market because with AT&T FirstNet and some of these other protocols that public safety is buying into, and that these companies are moving toward 5G solutions, the entire radio structure is liable to change in the next few years. And when it does, all these manufacturers that are making DMR radios at the moment, they're going to switch over and they're going to start making that 5G compatible solution, and won't have DMR radios being produced like they are.
So not even going with the NXDN. They're going to skip that and go to 5G.
That's kind of where he was talking, because that's where public safety's looking. That's where these big companies are trying to take it, is to like the AT&T FirstNet type of a deal. So
Okay.
that's kind of where he saw that going, and he sees D-Star and Fusion more as these were designed as amateur radio protocols, and they'll continue to be amateur radio protocols.
Yeah, those two will survive, and if they do go to some other system like the 5G, we're gonna have a whole lot of radios come on the market for us to pick up really cheap. Other questions?
Greg, I just wanted to say thank you. I don't pretend to, Gary, KB7 QWC, I don't pretend to understand everything you put out, but I have a lot better view of it. Thank you.
Yeah, take a look at the slides, and it took me, it took a long time trying to figure out those two slides, and I'm sure I've got some of it wrong, but I tried to put enough detail in there that it might start making a little more sense when you hear things down the road. Something will come up and say, oh, I remember I heard that term, and if that happens, then I've accomplished my mission. So thank you, Brian. Back to you.